We finally getting some sanity put back in college football. Power conferences are in talks to add regulations on NIL and transfers. So that's good news. Welcome to the Nitro Show, college football from a Georgia point of view. I'm Burl. Normally with me is my partner, Street. Unfortunately, he's out this week, so I'm riding solo again. And we want to send our well wishes, T's and P's, as Pat McAfee would say, to Street and his family. And we'll be thinking about him throughout the show and the rest of this week. So today, though, we are talking potential new college football enforcement entity, getting some regulations. There's been meetings between Big Ten and SEC about potentially changing how seeding works in the 2025 college football playoff. And ESPN gives UGA some more bulletin board material. I know, this is my shocked face. And last but not least, we see why the Eagles love drafting some dogs. But first, if you haven't already, please just take a few minutes to subscribe. Actually, it's less than a minute. You can just click the little button down here and subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, like this video, smash that like button. It really helps the show. Also, post some comments. We want to know what you think about the show, your opinion on the topics, whatever. Happy to share some info with you and chat back and forth with you. We're always up for a good debate. All right. Let's dive in. New college football enforcement entity is being discussed. Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports caught up with LSU coach Brian Kelly, and this was after some of the SEC meetings down in New Orleans. And Brian Kelly said that he thought going into the meetings that he was very skeptical of the changes and how that might work. But after coming out of the meetings, he was pretty confident and felt much better about the proposals that they were proposing. But they did stress that these are just ideas and concepts up for discussion, but they were shared with coaches and athletic directors. So there's some progress getting made. So key points that you need to know as a college football fan about these ideas and concepts. There's going to be, for lack of a better term, a salary cap. So salary cap would be $20.5 million of revenue share between the schools and the players. And there's some rules around this. So if a team goes over that limit, then they're potentially going to have to pay 3 to 5 times the amount that they exceeded by. So essentially a luxury tax, like you have in the NFL, but a little more painful for the schools. And on top of that, your 20.5 pool of money for the next year gets reduced however much you overspend. So we could see people trying to game this system. I was thinking about that today. If a team is just right at the cusp of being that national title winner team, you could totally see a team like Ohio State overpaying, or Georgia for that matter, Texas. Those are the ones that come to mind for me. Maybe Miami. Just overpaying, busting through that threshold, and taking that hit the next year, and they might be fine with that. You never know. And you see these teams, they win a national title, they're going to have a decent team that year. They basically sell their souls to win that national title, start the rebuild a little slower. But I could totally see that happening. They are also talking about placing limits on the number of transfer players schools can sign, which I could totally see a scenario where a player ends up staying at their school just because the school that they wanted to go to reached their limit of players that they can accept. I really like this. This is probably one of the more important pieces of this regulatory body, which, by the way, doesn't have a name yet, doesn't have a president because, again, ideas and concepts. But yeah, limits on number of players that can transfer, that a school can sign. That is awesome. I really do like that, because right now you see a lot of tampering going on. It's the Wild West, and there's potential fines and suspensions for tampering and doing all this, basically everything that you do today. So positive step in the right direction. Really, really like this part. I think that's going to be beneficial just to the game as a whole, because I really see the movement of players at the rate that they're going as a detriment to the quality of the actual play on the field. Just one man's opinion, but I absolutely believe it, just because you see these players that have gone to the NFL from Georgia, particularly in Philly, and they are praised for how Georgia developed them. And if you're not in a program for a consistent amount of years, you're going to miss out on that development. If you go from school to school, you might get a little bit of development here, but then you might go to another school that has crappy coaches. You're just there for a paycheck. You're not getting better. You're not learning anything. So that play on the field is not going to look as great, but you still might have talent. You still got that reputation of being whatever ranked recruit you were. And then you go to another team, and you just hope that someone can mold that clay to be a good football product on the field. That's really my concern with all the transfers. So limiting that, I think we see some more stability, which that's really what we want as fans. We want to invest in these players, no pun intended, but invest in them. And you love to have these guys that you can look back on and say, man, that was a great player. And not just, well, he was great while he was at Georgia, and then he went to some other school and stunk, or sucked at Georgia and then went somewhere and was great and beat our butts later on. I mean, it's nice knowing that when someone goes to a school that they're going to be there and work their way up and earn it on the field. Okay, rant over about transfers. The other thing is they're looking at creating this clearinghouse for NIL deals, which this is interesting. So Deloitte, one of the big 4, 5 county, whatever, they do consulting. They'll be auditing NIL deals over $600. And this is to ensure that the deal is authentic. So they're trying to prevent the return of the bag man, although I don't think that's going to be possible because you can't track cash. Not really sure how this particular function or these regulations for the NIL stuff, I'm not really sure how that gets enforced. That I see this particular point being taken to court fairly quickly. I don't know how you can police a NIL deal if, say, some car dealership, they want to pay you way more than what the NIL clearinghouse says your value is. You can't tell me that player is going to be really pissed off that now they're going to be ineligible next season because they signed an NIL deal with local car dealership that's more than their NIL evaluation, which how do you even come up with that? I don't know. I mean, I would think that NIL is whatever the market's willing to pay, but we'll see. I feel like that's going to end up in court. Wouldn't shock me one bit. And I could see some of these other areas being taken to court too. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the beast. And until there's, say, a players union, some kind of true governing body where there's collective bargaining, there's going to be legal battles all the time. So strap in. It looks like at least we're headed on the right track. I'm very excited about these potential changes. We'll see if the rest of the conferences are willing to buy into this, because I feel like that most conferences, most teams would love having something like this, because it's been total chaos for the past few years. Ever since they overturned the rule about you having to stay at a school for a year before transferring, it's been wild. I mean, you've seen tons of players hit the portal. When Nick Saban retired, that team disbanded for a minute, and you see it all over the place. I mean, you've got players that have played on 5 teams because of crazy eligibility rules now between COVID, and now you've got the JUCO rules. So who knows what eligibility is really going to mean in the future of college football. It might not even be a thing, which that would be weird. Seems like it should be a thing. Like you should say, all right, you've played for 5 years, you need to find employment with another league, or find employment elsewhere. Maybe use that degree that hopefully you earned and go do something cool. I really do hope we get some rules around all this stuff. It's insanely frustrating to see your favorite players just leave, or players that you've been excited about because you followed them on the recruiting trail. It's so frustrating to see players leave, especially when they're about to be front and center starter on the team and they're just gone. Hopefully it happens. Hopefully we get that entity, that unnamed entity. Sounds very ominous. Okay, before we dive into our next topic, I just want to say, please like this video, hit that subscribe button. That's how we keep this show going. It helps us continue on. And we really, really appreciate it. And drop some comments if you have some thoughts about the new unnamed enforcement entity. Love to hear from you. Another Ross Dellinger article at Yahoo Sports is reporting that, of course, the SEC and the Big Ten, they're at it again. They're pretty much the instigators of all this stuff because they're the two biggest, most powerful conferences, and they will have all the control after this current CFP agreement expires. For 2025, they're trying to convince the other conferences to change how seeding works in the CFP. So today, the seeding is totally dumb. It makes no sense. You've got teams that are ranked really low compared to other teams that maybe didn't win their conference. But since that lower seeded team won their conference, now they're a higher seed in the playoffs and they get the bye. So it's just wild. It doesn't make sense. So you've got SEC, Big Ten. They're just looking to change it to where it's based off the selection committee's rankings. So whatever that final ranking is, that's your seeding, because that's logical. Like, why did they do that in the first place? I mean, they got all wrapped up in trying to make it all complicated and cool and stuff. The more that they made it cool, the worse it got. So this would be a welcome change. I would love to see this year, but most likely it's not going to happen, mainly because of the other conferences. They actually have an advantage in this current system because of the scenario that I explained. Lower seeded team wins their conference, they get a bye because they're one of the 4 highest ranked teams that won their conference. So not only do they get whatever money they get for making the playoff, but they also get additional money for advancing in the playoff. So it really helps the other conferences out more than Big Ten and SEC, because we know the SEC and Big Ten are going to fill up this playoff with majority of the teams. Yeah, so cross your fingers, say your prayers, hope for the best. I just hope that we get some real sanity added back into college football. I think changing the seeding so it matches the rankings would be the right thing to do. But when it comes to money, the right thing to do is not always the thing that is chosen. So, all right, getting a little philosophical there. Let's move on. Let's talk some dogs. All right. So this is going to be a fun one. So our favorite worldwide leader, ESPN, has given Georgia and Kirby Smart and all those guys a little bit more bulletin board material. James Morgan at UGA Wire at USA Today is reporting on Bill Connolly's article on ESPN. They are saying that UGA is one of the most likely teams to regress in 2025. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that it doesn't matter. I could see that happening, but I don't think it will, because I've seen the product on the field the past few years. And if you look at Georgia's recruiting classes over the past 5 years, it's been top 5 every year since 2021. So we're number 4 in 2021, number 3 in 22, number 2 in 23, and number 1 in 24, and number 2 in 2025. Pretty impressive stuff from Kirby Smart and his staff at keeping the pantry stocked and loaded with 5-star players and really great 4-stars. And Georgia's always been really good about developing lower star players too, i.e. Lad McConkey, 3-star. was awesome. We see it in the NFL now, just killing it. And we see it all the time at Georgia. But Bill he makes some valid points. I'll give him that. So Homer aside, which I'm a Georgia Homer. You see it. You see it. I don't care. But he does make some valid points. I do feel like I'm a rational Homer. So key points, Georgia's losing some key producers, particularly in the trenches on both sides of the ball. So Georgia's losing 7 of their 8 top sack producers. That to me is probably the most significant number in all of this, is because that has been where Georgia's strength has lied. That front 7 on defense has been the key to Georgia's success over the past few years, especially last year with the struggles that the offense had. And speaking of the offense, losing 4 of the 5 starting O-linemen, this I'm less worried about because that O-line did not play well in 2024. We talked about that a lot throughout the season. We saw them get absolutely manhandled at Ole Miss and in the Sugar Bowl to Notre Dame. It was a abysmal performance by that O-line. So not really losing any sleep over that, especially when you look at the recruiting classes and the O-linemen that are coming up through the program. I think we're gonna have a young line, definitely inexperienced, but I think there's gonna be a lot of talent that has been developed over the past few years, and I think it's gonna give us a better shot, or at least better productivity. We'll say that out of the O-line. So now Georgia has lost a lot of players to the NFL. 14 players were invited to the combine, 17 declared. So that's not an insignificant number. I mean, you have 11 players on each side of the ball, so 22 total, and you lose 17. It's a lot of players. Not to mention, you had some big NIL transfers. Carson back to Miami, Damon Wilson to Missouri. They were 2 of the top 3 ranked players in the transfer portal this offseason. And they're both gone. Although I don't think a lot of people are really missing Carson back at this point. In my opinion, I thought it would have been really nice to have a player of his caliber back at Georgia, but I'm still excited for the quarterbacks that are in that room today with Gunnar Stockton, Ryan Puglisi. We've got some players coming in. We might be getting Jared Curtis, which is the top quarterback in the 26 class. I know that's down the road, but future's bright there. The cupboard's not bare. And we got to see a little bit of what Gunnar Stockton can do at the end of last season, playing second half of the SEC championship against Texas, playing the full game against Notre Dame. And his play was really good. It was really good for a guy who got to play in a game and a half of the most pressure-packed football at the college level. And he came in undaunted, picked up right where Carson left off, and especially in those last 2 games. He played great. That offensive line did not. And you have a porous offensive line and an inexperienced quarterback. You're going to see plays like the strip sack fumble that we saw against Notre Dame. That's going to happen. It's inevitable. And it did. But poor Georgia, whatever shall we do? I mean, is Kirby going to make it? Come on, ESPN. Tell me. Quit ruining my dreams. But anyway, I think Georgia's going to be fine. Again, top 5 recruiting classes past 5 years. And we're getting more and more talent. We've also reloaded at wide receiver. Last year, that was a position of weakness for us, for Georgia. Through the transfer portal and through recruiting and returning players, we've got some studs, and potentially, depending on how court cases go in Athens, Georgia, we might get another one. And boy, that would be huge. Really great for a young quarterback who's going to need some good pass catchers. So reloaded at wide receiver. We've got a ton of experience coming back at tight end. Oscar Delp, this could be his year, his breakout year. He was roommates with Gunnar. So we know that they have connection, and apparently there wasn't really much connection between Oscar and Carson last year. which I think we saw. And near the end of the year, we did finally see Oscar getting more involved, and he did great. He is one of the best ball carriers that Georgia has. Getting him the ball in space anywhere, he's going to get you some tough yards, and he's got speed. So don't sleep on Oscar Delp. And we also have Lawson Lucky. He's a big time pass catcher. But we'll see. Let's see what happens. Okay, another fun topic. Let's talk about why the Eagles love drafting dogs. So from Christian Kirby II, I believe, reporting from SI.com, Howie Roseman at a press conference gave some remarks about why he loves drafting players out of Georgia. So let's listen to him.
Incredibly detailed program. And obviously, they have a history of winning. When you look at it, when you add new players and you add this many new players from one place, they also know how to play off each other. They have a chemistry that normally you have to cultivate through your team and through years of practice, and so you get a head start. And then you're talking about really putting into place one of the greatest defenses in the history of college football. And they play with an edge. They play with a mentality, and Kirby does a phenomenal job.
I mean, are we paying the Eagles to come up with this recruiting material? And this is amazing. We talked about it last week, all the recruiting material coming out of the Super Bowl, and now we just get even more. Speaks volumes to what Kirby's been able to do at Georgia and the program that he has built with the level of standards that he's set. And I love what he said about the program being very detailed and having players that played with each other at Georgia being able to feed off each other and play off each other. That's a huge bonus. And it was great that he mentioned these players played on some of the greatest defenses in college football history. Can't argue with that. Success breeds success. And hopefully we see Georgia continue to gather some momentum this offseason, get those players coached up and ready for the beginning of the year so that we don't see this regression that ESPN is predicting. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight. Thank you again for spending time with us tonight, whatever time it is around your part of the woods. If you haven't already, if you made it this far, like this video, hit that subscribe button, hit the notify bell so you get notified whenever we put up some new content, and drop some comments. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show, what you think of what are your opinions on these topics. We'd love to hear from you. And until next week, go Dogs.